My name is Avanil, and I want to tell you something very personal. The first time I tried to speak English in front of people, I froze. My mouth was dry, my hands were shaking, and not a single word came out. Everyone was looking at me, waiting, but I just stood there, silent, like a broken radio. I wanted to disappear. That night, when I went home, I cried. I felt so small, so stupid, like I would never be able to speak this language. But deep inside, something told me, this cannot be the end of my story. I had a dream. I wanted to travel, to meet people, to work, to live a bigger life. And I knew one thing. Without English, that dream would stay locked away. This is the story of how I broke that lock. Part 1. I grew up in a small town where almost nobody spoke English. At school, we had English classes, but they were only grammar drills and boring textbooks. I could write a little, I could read some sentences, but when it came to speaking, I was lost. I remember one time when a tourist asked me for directions. He smiled kindly and said, "Excuse me, can you help me?" My brain went blank. I knew the words, but I could not put them together. I just pointed with my hand and whispered something like, "That road, go." And then he walked away confused. I felt so embarrassed. Inside, I thought, why do I study so many years and still cannot say one simple sentence? That moment stayed with me for a long time. At that time, I thought English was only for smart people. I believed that maybe my brain was too weak, maybe my tongue was too heavy, maybe my accent was too strange. Every time I tried to speak, I heard my own mistakes louder than my voice. And when people laughed or corrected me, it was like a knife inside my chest. But then something happened that changed everything. One day, my cousin showed me a small phrase he learned online. "How are you?" I laughed and said, "Everybody knows that." But then he said, "No, look, say it. Say it again. Say it 5 times." And we repeated together, "How are you? How are you? How are you?" Something strange happened. For the first time, I felt the sentence living in my mouth. It was not grammar. It was sound. It was real. That night, I walked around my room saying, "How are you?" to the walls, to the mirror, even to my pillow. I felt silly, but also free. I realized maybe I can learn English not with big books, but with small pieces, survival sentences, phrases I can use right away. So I started collecting small sentences like treasures. My name is, I am from, I like, can you help me? Each one felt like a new tool in my pocket. I practiced them everywhere, alone and with friends. Slowly, my fear started to break. But the biggest change came when I discovered shadowing. I did not know this word at first. I just found a video of a person speaking English slowly. I pressed play, and then I repeated the words at the same time like a shadow. At first I failed. I was too slow. My mouth could not keep up, but I kept going. Every day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then 20. I spoke with the voices on my phone. It felt strange, like I was borrowing someone else's mouth. But after weeks, I noticed something powerful. My tongue was moving faster, my ears were sharper, and for the first time in my life, English sentences came out without thinking. That was the beginning of my journey. But it was only the beginning. Part 2. The first time I tried shadowing outside my room, I felt so nervous. I put my earphones in, played a short English podcast, and walked to school. I whispered the words while I walked. People looked at me strangely, but I didn't care. I told myself, they don't understand that I am training my future. At the beginning, my voice was low, like a secret. Later, my voice became stronger. Every step on the road, every word in my ear, felt like a small victory. But of course, it was not easy. Many times I stopped and asked myself, why am I doing this? Why am I talking to myself like a crazy person? Sometimes I felt stupid. Sometimes I wanted to quit. But then I remembered that moment when I froze in front of people, when my mouth refused to move. That memory pushed me forward. I said to myself, never again. I will never feel that pain again. That pain became my power. One evening, I tried a new experiment. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at my reflection, and said, "Hello, my name is Avanil. Nice to meet you." I repeated it again and again. At first, I felt shy, even though I was alone. But after 10 minutes, something happened. I began to smile at myself. I began to believe my own words. For the first time, I felt that English was not just a subject. It was a part of me. My mirror became my first audience. My reflection became my first friend in English. After a few weeks, I started collecting survival sentences. These were short, simple phrases I could use anywhere. For example, can you say that again? I don't understand. Can you help me? I like this. I don't know. They were small, but they were powerful. With these sentences, I was never fully lost. Even if I didn't know many words, I could survive. I could stay in the conversation. And every time I used one in real life, I felt stronger. I still remember the first time I used one outside. I was in a shop, and the cashier spoke to me quickly in English. I didn't understand. Normally, I would just nod and pretend. But that day, I took a deep breath and said, "Can you say that again?" She smiled, repeated slowly, and I understood. It was a tiny success, but for me, it was huge. I walked out of the shop like a champion. My heart was jumping. I thought, yes, I can do this. English is not impossible. But the journey was not always straight. Some days I felt strong, and some days I felt weak. There were times when I practiced for an hour, and then I forgot everything the next day. There were days when I listened to English songs but understood nothing. I felt like a failure again. One night, I threw my notebook across the room and shouted, "I will never learn!" My eyes filled with tears. But then, in the silence of that night, I asked myself, what is the alternative? Stop learning? Live my whole life trapped in one language? No. That answer gave me new fire. So I made a promise. I would not quit. No matter how many times I failed, I would try again. Even if it was only 5 minutes a day, I would not stop. Small steps every day. That was my new rule. And slowly, the small steps began to add up. My ears became faster. My mouth became braver. I started to understand small jokes in English videos. I started to reply without translating in my head. It felt like magic, and the magic gave me hope. One day, my teacher asked a question in class. Normally, I would hide, look down, and pray that she didn't choose me. But that day, something inside me said, "Try." So I raised my hand. My voice was shaking, but I spoke. I think the answer is this. My grammar was not perfect. My pronunciation was not perfect. But the teacher understood me. The class understood me. And I survived. I didn't die of shame. I didn't fall apart. In fact, my classmates smiled. Some even clapped. That moment changed me. I realized that speaking English is not about being perfect. It's about being brave. From that day, my practice became different. Before, I practiced to avoid mistakes. Now, I practiced to share my voice. Before, I practiced to escape embarrassment. Now, I practice to enjoy communication. That small shift changed everything. I began to write short diary entries in English every night. Simple things like, "Today I walked to school. I listened to English. I was happy." Just 3 lines, sometimes 4. It was easy, but it was powerful. When I looked back after a month, I saw my progress. I saw that my words were growing. My English was growing. And most importantly, my confidence was growing. That is when I understood something important. English is not learned in one big step. English is learned in 1,000 small steps. And every step, no matter how small, opens a new door. Part 3. The first real test of my English came when I met a traveler in my town. He was from Canada, and he asked me for help with directions. My heart started beating fast. This was the moment. All my practice in the mirror, all my survival sentences, all the shadowing, I had to use them now. For 1 second, fear grabbed me. My old self wanted to run away, to stay silent, but my new self said, "No, try." So I opened my mouth and said slowly, "Go straight, turn left, bus station." It was not perfect. The grammar was broken. But he understood. He smiled and said, "Thank you." That smile felt like sunlight in my chest. I walked home like a hero. For the first time, I felt English was alive in me. That small success gave me courage. I started to look for more chances to use English. At first, I spoke to strangers online. I joined a free chat room where people practiced English together. The first time I entered, my hands were sweating. My heart was loud. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was shaking. I said, "Hello, my name is Avanil. I am from a small town." My accent was heavy. I heard my own mistakes, but nobody laughed. They listened. They answered. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. People don't care if you are perfect. They care if you are real. After that, I made a new habit. Every day, I tried to speak at least one sentence to someone in English. Sometimes it was online. Sometimes it was to a tourist. Sometimes it was just to myself in the mirror. One sentence a day. It sounds small, but it was powerful. Each sentence was like a seed, and slowly, my garden of English began to grow. But of course, the road was not always smooth. I remember one day in an online chat, I made a mistake with a word. I wanted to say beach, but I said something different that sounded bad. Everyone laughed. My face burned red. For a moment, I wanted to quit forever. But then, I laughed too. I said, "Sorry, mistake." And then we all continued. That day taught me something. Mistakes are not the end. Mistakes are part of the story. Without mistakes, there is no learning. Another thing that helped me was music. I began to listen to English songs every night. At first, I didn't understand anything. The words were too fast, too soft. But I chose one song I liked and I listened every day. Then I printed the lyrics and shadowed them. Slowly, the sounds became clear. One night, without thinking, I sang along. My voice was not beautiful, but my heart was happy. Singing made me feel free. It gave me rhythm. It gave me memory. It gave me joy. One of my biggest challenges was thinking in English. For a long time, I always translated in my head. When someone spoke, I heard the words, translated to my language, made an answer, then translated back to English. It was too slow. Conversations felt like heavy traffic. But then I discovered a trick. Talk to yourself in English. Every morning, I described my actions in English. I would say, I wake up, I wash my face, I make tea, I go outside. At first, it felt childish, but slowly, my brain began to accept English as a normal language, not just a subject in school. The more I did it, the faster my thoughts became. One morning, something amazing happened. I was walking to school and I saw a dog running across the street. Without thinking, I said in English, "Look at that dog. It's so fast." Only later did I realize I didn't translate. The sentence just came out. That was one of the happiest moments in my journey. It was proof that English was becoming part of my mind. But there was still a big fear inside me, speaking to groups. One day, my teacher asked me to give a small presentation in English. Just 2 minutes. But for me, it felt like 2 hours of terror. I prepared the sentences. I practiced in the mirror. I shadowed my own voice. On the day of the presentation, I stood in front of the class. My legs were shaking. My paper was shaking. I opened my mouth, and for 1 second, nothing came out. My old fear returned. But then I remembered all the small victories: the shop, the tourist, the songs, the mirror. I took a deep breath and said, "Hello, my name is Avenil. Today I want to talk about my favorite hobby." The words were simple. My grammar had mistakes, but I kept going. I spoke slowly, sentence by sentence. Some students smiled. The teacher nodded. When I finished, everyone clapped. My heart was still beating fast, but I did it. I survived. And more than that, I succeeded. After class, one of my friends said, "Your English is getting good." Those words felt like gold. That day I understood something very deep. Courage comes before confidence. If you wait for confidence, you will wait forever. But if you take one step with courage, confidence will follow. From then on, I was not afraid of mistakes anymore. I was afraid of silence. Because silence means no growth. Speaking, even with mistakes, means progress. So I chose progress. I chose mistakes. I chose courage. And with each choice, my English became stronger. Little by little, my world was opening. I could talk to new people, understand new songs, watch movies with less fear. English was not just a language, it was a key that was opening doors I never knew existed. Part 4. The moment I began to see real change in my life was when English gave me my first opportunity outside my small world. It was not a big job or a big trip. It was something very small, but for me, it was huge. One afternoon, my teacher told me there was a group of foreign volunteers visiting our town. They needed someone to show them around, to explain the market, the old buildings, the small river. She asked if any student wanted to help. For 1 second, I stayed quiet. My old fear whispered in my ear, "Not you. Your English is bad. You will fail. People will laugh." But then another voice spoke inside me. "This is your chance. This is why you practice. Take it." My hand went up before I could stop it. "I can do it," I said. The day of the visit, my stomach was full of butterflies. I wanted to run away. But when I saw the volunteers smiling, I remembered my survival sentences. I smiled back and said, "Hello, welcome. My name is Avenil. I will show you around." They nodded and followed me. At first, my sentences were short. "This is the market. People sell fruit. That is mango. This is bread." Simple words, but they understood. Then one of them asked me, "Do you like living here?" For a second, my brain froze. Then I remembered my practice. Think simple. Don't translate. I said, "Yes, I like my town. It is small, but people are kind." They smiled and said, "That's wonderful." In that moment, I realized something powerful. English is not about being perfect. English is about connecting. My small, broken sentences connected me to people from another country, and they smiled because they understood me. That smile was more important than perfect grammar. That day, English stopped being a school subject. It became a bridge. After the tour, one volunteer gave me a small book in English. It was about travel stories. He said, "This is for you. Your English is good. Keep going." My hands were shaking as I held the book. Nobody had ever given me a gift for my English before. That book became my treasure. Every night, I read one page. Sometimes I didn't understand. Sometimes I had to check words. But I kept reading, and slowly I began to dream in English. That experience opened my eyes. If I could guide people in English, what else could I do? What other doors could open? I began to dream bigger. Maybe one day I could travel. Maybe one day I could work with international people. Maybe one day I could make videos like the ones I watched when I was learning. But with bigger dreams came bigger fears. I knew I had to practice more, push myself harder. So I tried a new method. I started recording my voice in English. The first time, I felt embarrassed. My voice sounded strange. My accent was heavy. I wanted to delete it immediately. But I listened again and I said to myself, this is me. This is my starting point. If I keep going, it will get better. Every week, I recorded myself reading a short text or just speaking about my day. After a month, I listened to my first recording again. I was shocked. I had improved. My sentences were smoother. My voice was stronger. I realized progress is invisible day by day, but it becomes clear when you look back. Another thing that helped me was making English a part of my daily life. I changed the language on my phone to English. At first, it was confusing. Simple buttons like settings or notifications were strange. But after a few weeks, I learned them. My phone became my teacher. I also started thinking of objects around me in English. For example, when I looked at a chair, I said in my head, chair. When I touched water, I said, water. Slowly, my world began to wear English clothes, but still, the biggest challenge was speaking with real people. One evening, I joined an online language exchange. I was nervous. My partner was a girl from Japan who wanted to practice too. She said, hello, and I said, hello. We both laughed nervously. Then we started with small sentences. What is your hobby? I like reading. What food do you like? I like noodles. It was simple, but it was real communication. At the end of the call, she said, you speak well. I couldn't believe it. Someone from another country, someone I never met before, understood me. That feeling was electric. Of course, there were also times I failed. Once, I joined a group call and everyone spoke too fast. I understood nothing. I stayed quiet the whole time. When the call ended, I felt useless. I told myself, maybe I will never catch up. That night, I almost gave up. But then I remembered the volunteer's gift, the travel book. I opened it, read one story, and said to myself, if I can read this today, maybe tomorrow I can understand one more sentence in conversation. That thought saved me. The next day, I tried again. I slowed down my practice. Instead of long videos, I watched short clips. Instead of long conversations, I focused on one or two questions. Step by step, my ear grew stronger. I realized something. Learning English is not about speed. It's about consistency. Small drops of water fill the bucket. Small steps build the road. One day, my teacher announced there would be an English-speaking contest in the city. She looked at me and said, you should join. My first reaction was fear. Me? No, I will make mistakes. I will embarrass myself. But then I remembered everything. The tourist, the shop, the volunteers, the online calls. All those small victories pushed me forward. I said yes. I practiced for weeks. I wrote a short speech about dreams and opportunities. I practiced in front of the mirror, shadowed my own recording, and even spoke to my pillow at night. The day of the contest, I stood on stage. My hands were cold, my voice was shaking, but then I remembered, courage first, confidence later. I took a deep breath and spoke. My grammar was not perfect, my accent was still heavy, but my words came from the heart. I talked about how English was opening doors for me, how it was giving me a new life. When I finished, the audience clapped loudly. I didn't win first prize, but I won something more important: belief in myself. That contest was my turning point. I realized that English was not just about school, not just about exams. It was about connection, courage, and new life. Part 5. There is one night I will never forget. It was the night when I felt, for the first time, that I was no longer a student of English. I was a speaker of English. It did not happen in a classroom. It did not happen in a contest. It happened in a small cafe. I was sitting with some friends, and one of them brought along 2 travelers from Europe. They spoke no language from my country, only English. My friends looked at me and said, "You can talk with them, right?" My heart jumped into my throat. I wanted to say no. I wanted to hide, but then I remembered all those nights of shadowing, all those sentences in front of the mirror, all those small victories. They were for this moment. So I smiled nervously and said, "Hi, my name is Avenil. Nice to meet you." And something magical happened. The conversation began to flow. They asked me about my town. I told them about the river, the market, the music. They asked me about my dreams. I told them I wanted to travel, to learn, to meet people. Sometimes I searched for words, but they waited. Sometimes I made mistakes, but they understood. We laughed together. We shared stories. And for 2 hours, I lived in English. When I walked home that night, I looked up at the stars and I cried. But these were not the same tears I cried years ago. These were tears of joy. I had done it. I had spoken English for real, for hours, with real people, and I had survived. More than that, I had enjoyed it. My old fear was gone. I was free. That night changed everything. It was like a door in my mind had opened, and behind it was a whole new world. I realized that English is not just grammar, not just vocabulary, not just exams. English is a life. It is music. It is movies. It is conversations. It is dreams. It is a bridge to every corner of the world. And I was now walking across that bridge. After that breakthrough, my confidence grew fast. I started to join more online groups. I joined international book clubs. I joined small English meetups in nearby cities. Every new conversation gave me more energy. I noticed something strange. The more I spoke, the less I thought about grammar, the less I worried about mistakes. Instead, I focused on stories, on emotions, on connection. My English was not perfect, but it was alive. One day, in an online group, someone asked me for advice. They said, "How do you speak so easily? How did you learn?" For a second, I laughed. Me? The boy who once froze in silence, the boy who once cried in his room because he could not say a single sentence? And now, Someone was asking me for advice. I felt proud, but also humble. I told them the truth. Small steps, survival sentences, shadowing, talking to myself, courage first, confidence later. And when I said those words, I realized I was not only learning anymore, I was teaching, and teaching gave me even more power. But let me be honest, even after my breakthrough, I still had bad days. Some days, I listened to a movie and understood nothing. Some days, my tongue felt heavy and my words came out wrong. But the difference now was this: I didn't give up. Before, failure meant the end. Now, failure was just part of the process. I knew that behind every failure was another door waiting to open. Another big change in my journey was writing. At first, my English writing was poor, short sentences, many mistakes, but I started a small online journal. Every day, I wrote 3 things: something I did, something I felt, and something I learned. For example, I met a traveler today. I felt happy. I learned a new word: adventure. It was simple, but powerful. Writing helped me see my thoughts clearly. It also showed me that I could express myself, even with limited words. After some months, when I read my old entries, I saw my growth. My sentences were longer. My ideas were clearer. That gave me confidence not only in speaking, but also in expressing myself in any form. The most emotional moment came when I called my cousin, the same cousin who once showed me the simple phrase, "How are you?" Years ago, I laughed at that phrase. Now I spoke to him for 30 minutes in English. We both laughed at the memory. I told him, "That small sentence changed my life." He smiled and said, "I knew you could do it." That call was special. It showed me that even the smallest step, even one simple phrase, can be the beginning of a new journey. I started to dream bigger again. If I could speak in cafes, if I could guide tourists, if I could talk online, maybe one day I could travel. Maybe I could work in another country. Maybe I could inspire others, just like English learners on YouTube once inspired me. These dreams were no longer impossible. They were waiting. And I had the key. That is when I finally understood the real lesson. English is not about words. It is about doors. Every sentence opens a new door. Every mistake is a key you drop, but you can always pick it up again. Every act of courage is a hand that pushes the door wider. And behind those doors there is a bigger life, a life full of connection, opportunity, and freedom. Part 6. Looking back now, I can see how every step, every mistake, every tear, and every smile was part of my journey. When I started, I thought English was just a subject, something to pass in school. I thought it was only about grammar rules, exams, and red marks on my notebook. But I was wrong. English was much bigger. English was a doorway to new people, new dreams, new opportunities, and a new me. I remember the person I was before English. I was quiet, I was shy, I was afraid to speak, even in my own language sometimes. I thought my life would stay small, inside the borders of my town. But when I started to learn English, little by little, my walls began to break. Each survival sentence was a hammer. Each shadowing session was a crack in the wall. Each conversation was a window, and finally, when I had the courage to speak freely, the whole wall fell down. On the other side was freedom. Learning English taught me something deeper about life. You don't need to be perfect to move forward. You don't need to have the best accent, the biggest vocabulary, or the highest grades. What you need is courage. Courage to say the first sentence. Courage to make mistakes. Courage to laugh at yourself and try again. When you have courage, confidence comes later, step by step. This is not only true for English, this is true for everything in life. I realized that when I spoke English, I was not just learning a language. I was learning how to be brave. I was learning how to open doors instead of waiting for someone else to open them for me. I was learning how to live bigger, not smaller. That is why I say today, English opens every door, not just doors to jobs or travel, but doors inside yourself, doors to new parts of your character, new parts of your heart, new parts of your future. There was one final test that proved this to me. I was invited to a small seminar in the city where students from different countries came together to share ideas. I was the only one from my town. At first I thought, I don't belong here. These people are smarter. Their English is better. But then I remembered my journey. I remembered the tourist, the cashier, the volunteers, the cafe, the contest. I remembered that every big thing in my life came from saying yes, even when I was scared. So I stood up and shared my story in English. I told them how I used to freeze, how I used to cry, how I used to hate myself for failing. I told them about the mirror, the shadowing, the survival sentences, the songs, the small victories. And when I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then they clapped. Not because my English was perfect, it was not. They clapped because my story was real, and that was the moment I knew my voice matters, even in English, especially in English. Now, when I meet people who are just starting, who feel afraid, who think, I will never learn, I look at them and I see myself. I see the boy who once stood silent in front of the class. I see the boy who once wanted to give up. And I want to tell them, do not give up. Please do not give up. Because on the other side of your fear is freedom. On the other side of your small steps is a big life. On the other side of your mistakes is your future. My final lesson is this. English is not something you learn in one day, 1 month, or 1 year. English is a journey of courage, patience, and hope, and this journey never really ends. Even now, I am still learning, still growing, still opening new doors, but that is the beauty of it. Every day, there is a new word, a new sentence, a new friend, a new chance. Every day, English gives me a gift. So if you are listening to me now, and if you feel lost or weak, remember my story. Remember that I was once like you. I was afraid, embarrassed, broken, but I kept walking, step by step. And if I can do it, you can do it too. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait until you feel ready. Start now. Speak one sentence today. Write one line today. Listen to one voice today. Tomorrow, do it again, and again, and again. Small steps every day. That is the secret. That is how you open the door. And once you open the door, never look back, because on the other side is not just English. On the other side is your new life. So, my friend, are you ready? Are you ready to open your door? If my story touched you, if it gave you even a little bit of courage, then I ask you, join me on this journey. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. We are not just learning English, we are building our lives one word at a time, and together we will open every door.